Some of our discussion has hinted that working as a group for a common purpose leads to women having the confidence, strength, and shared knowledge to make their voices heard in wider arenas. They may wish to play a larger part in community organizations where they have in the past only been marginal. For example, in religions based on a sacred book, such as Christianity, full participation is open to the literate. There are many cases of women who have learnt to read taking a very active part, often a leading part, in church organizations, for instance in Rwanda, in very desperate times for that country. Sometimes women church leaders, on joining literate society, take up the cause of literacy for fellow women, and a widespread movement develops. As with the Baptist Church in a number of countries, they're empowered enough to want to organize in new ways to spread literacy to others. There are women-only organizations of all kinds, such as the economic ones already mentioned, in which new literate activists come to the fore, and which they may move to involvement in community issues. We've seen the example of SEWA, with its readiness to intervene in what members perceive as cases of social injustice. There are multifarious campaigns taken up by women who only have strength and capacity because at least some members have access to appropriate literacy. One example is the group of women in Mumbai who formed a consensus to demonstrate against men's excessive drinking. Another is the women's group in Ethiopia, which managed to persuade 2 provinces in that country to legislate against FGM. Then there are large organizations in South America which have undertaken large-scale campaigns using mass media and other means, engaging both highly educated and new literate women. One of these is the Flora Tristan movement in Peru. Working with other groups, it has achieved the passage of laws against family violence and one codifying the right of children and adolescents. It has also been successful in the establishment of women's police posts to which women may confidently have recourse when they may feel less sure of getting a hearing from male police. Flora Tristan is a large organization with many educated members, but it includes and encourages the non-literate and the less literate. One woman who participated said that at first, when they wanted to join in community meetings, the men used to send them away. She said they'd tell us, "Go home and take care of the children, wash their underwear." Our thinking was to enter public life. Today at the Kwaves, or self-management community, they accept us. Now I'm a leader of its electoral committee and serve as a supervisor. I'm vice president of the Human Rights Committee in another organization. I say, see, I've gone from the ladle to this. I've gone from the kitchen to this. I fight to get other people on their way, not to take over everything. Her story is instructive as it shows an individual barred from community involvement, moving in and recognizing herself as a person with capacity for political activity. She also has a sense of responsibility to others who haven't yet joined in. Literacy on its own will not lead to political empowerment, but it is clearly essential for anyone who is to take part in public life in modern times. In Uganda, when the Constitution demanded women's representation at every political level, from village committees upwards, it acted as a spur to women respected in the community to learn to read and write so that they could stand for election. At other times, it's the acquisition of literacy which leads women to join in public campaigns and may then empower them to move into politics. This is often a courageous step and requires the shaking off of many accepted attitudes. To sum up, we have learnt from earlier work by UNESCO that literacy is a human right, part of lifelong learning, and that adult literacy is both a support for schooling provision and a key to collective or community change. We have learnt from the UNDP that literacy is a critical element in human development and deduced from their work that equity in literacy access helps towards social symmetry and harmony. We've seen that both literacy and empowerment are experienced as processes, that literacy learning has cultural as well as technical aspects. We haven't claimed that literacy acquisition automatically leads to empowerment and beyond that to emancipation, but we have seen that it has a transformative effect on a person's confidence, and we've also seen that illiteracy at the present day implies disempowerment, inequity, and loss of dignity, and that literacy is at least a key to empowerment. I hope that the examples and voices I've given of some of those who've used that key may have been both interesting and inspiring. I hope that they may have helped to energize all of us here to a new will to provide larger scale and more appropriate chances for literacy learning across the world. I hope we will not think of literacy only on September the 8th, but on every day of the year. We all know of local authorities, such as the Philippines Municipal Literacy Coordinating Council, another prize winner today, which have devoted energy and resources to literacy action. And we know of some governments too, which continue to have a commitment. But we need a new vision, whereby national governments at large, international aid donors, and NGOs put literacy back in the forefront of their human rights and development agenda. There are non-educational actions to be taken, including more support for those developing solar-powered computers and ensuring that mobile telephone networks expand, as there are signs that the telephone companies are losing interest in some developing countries. There may be a need for legislation to remove the barriers to participation in literacy for women and other disenfranchised groups. Educationally, policymakers might benefit from more discussion with some of the modern literacy experts, and there's a constant need for training of literacy facilitators so that they tune in with the ideas and interests of adult learners. Above all, it would be a very great inspiration if members would respond to the calls we have had, both from the Secretary General of the UN and the Director General of UNESCO, and by increasing resources within their own countries and by empowering UNESCO, our world brain would put literacy back at the core of its work. Finding more hard money to fund programs of research, information, and advice, and taking the lead in disseminating new ideas. Both member states and UNESCO itself will then truly remove the stigma from people like Jamila and enable people like Lucy to have more in her life than sticks in the sand.